What happens when love itself is declared an enemy of the state? In the 6th century, under the reign of Emperor Justinian I, known as Justinian the Great, the Byzantine Empire reached a pivotal turning point where law, religion, and authority collided in the most destructive ways. From 527 to 565 CE, Justinian sought not only to restore the grandeur of Rome, but to reshape society through an iron grip of legislation and faith. His ambition stretched beyond armies and architecture. It reached into bedrooms, into bodies, into the very souls of his subjects. Among his most chilling measures were laws that singled out men accused of same-gender intimacy. With words sharp as a sword, Justinian fused imperial decrees with divine judgment, turning private desire into a public crime. The Codex Justinianus, centerpiece of his monumental Corpus Juris Civilis, gave chilling form to this persecution. It coldly declared that those who shamed the name of man through relations with other males were to face the ultimate penalty: death. No escape, no mercy. The law was written not as guidance, but as condemnation. These brutal reforms did not emerge in a vacuum. They were born in an atmosphere where the Christian Church had become the moral compass of empire. From the late 4th century onward, emperors increasingly tied their authority to bishops and councils. Leaders like John Chrysostom and Ambrose of Milan thundered from pulpits, warning that same-gender intimacy was not merely sin, but contagion of corruption that could draw God's wrath upon entire cities. To them, intimacy between men was a plague of the soul, capable of summoning earthquakes, famine, and disease. It was under this climate of fear that Justinian escalated repression to unprecedented levels. In 559 CE, he issued a notorious edict declaring that homosexual behavior was the cause of natural disasters. Earthquakes, plagues, and famine were not random tragedies, he insisted, but divine punishment provoked by sodomy. His words transformed prejudice into weaponry, a theological justification for state violence. Behind this decree lay both calculation and cruelty, to strengthen imperial control by pleasing the church. While terrorizing his people into obedience, the result was more than punishment. It was erasure. Identities were silenced, relationships destroyed, and entire communities vanished from the record. No names survived, no confessions preserved downly. The emperor's decree and the executions it unleashed, through a single line of law etched into imperial code, the state became executioner, the church became judge, and love itself became a crime worthy of death. Public executions soared in flame in Justinian's empire. The law was not meant to remain trapped in dusty parchment. It was designed to breathe through fire, through steel, through spectacle. Once Emperor Justinian's decree against men accused of same-gender intimacy was enforced, the empire descended into a theater of fear. Punishment became ritual. Death became performance, and the entire city was invited to watch. The machinery of execution was public by design. Those accused were dragged from their homes, often under the cover of night, and marched through crowded streets at dawn. Neighbors whispered, clergy pointed, soldiers jeered. Naked and humiliated, the condemned were displayed as moral warnings before the eyes of trembling crowds. Their supposed sin was paraded more than their bodies, as placards declared their alleged crimes. This was not, just as it was theater, meant to terrify. Some were burned alive, their cries rising alongside the flames as the empire declared itself purified through fire. Burning was no accident of cruelty. It carried theological meaning. The flames, priests proclaimed, did not just destroy the flesh, they cleansed the empire of corruption. Others met the sword. Beheadings were swift, but no less symbolic, the severing of life, seen as severing the contagion from society. In earlier decades, echoes of Roman tradition lingered. Some were thrown to wild beasts and spectacles that blurred the line between punishment and entertainment. Constantinople, the empire's jewel, witnessed these executions in its grandest squares. Beneath towering domes and gleaming mosaics, before icons of Christ and saints, human beings were consumed by fire or blade. The crowd was not a passive witness. It was a participant. The spectacle reinforced a chilling lesson. Identity could be erased by decree, and love could be punished by death. The silence of historians and the echo of terror contemporary sources rarely speak plainly. Copius of Caesarea, Justinian's own court historian, avoided naming these punishments in his official works. Yet, his secret history offers glimpses of the cruelty. He wrote of a regime where bodies perished, but spirits were crushed beyond recognition, though he never explicitly labeled the victims as men accused of same-gender relations. His words describe the atmosphere of terror surrounding Justinian's moral laws. Silence in the record is not absence of evidence. It is testimony to fear. This calculated silence was itself a punishment. The condemned were denied even the dignity of being remembered. No names, no identities, no stories survive. Only the emperor's decree remains, echoing like an iron bell across the centuries. The end of reputation, penance, and exile for some death was not imposed. But survival did not mean freedom, meant annihilation of another kind. Exile and public penance became tools of slow destruction. Men convicted under Justinian's laws could be banished for life, stripped of all property, forced into poverty, and declared unworthy of citizenship. Exile in Byzantium was not relocation, it was obliteration. To be expelled was to cease existing in the moral body of the empire. Public penance was no less devastating. The accused might be chained in church courtyards, clothed in coarse penitential garments, and forced to confess their sins before assembled crowds. Priests led prayers condemning them while citizens looked on. This was not forgiveness, it was humiliation. The ritual reduced men to symbols of corruption, shattering identity under the weight of shame. Erasure through law and faith. These punishments drew upon deep traditions in Roman and Christian authority. Roman emperors had long used exile to silence opponents, but Justinian fused this with Christian notions of penance. His novel's new laws, supplementing the Codex, ordered bishops to denounce and remove men guilty of same-gender conduct, warning that their crimes called down divine wrath upon cities. Death was not the only sentence. Disgrace was another. The emperor demanded that even those spared execution be destroyed socially and spiritually. The condemned lost more than freedom. Their property was seized, their families dishonored, their homes claimed by the state. Exile was often to remote provinces or harsh monasteries, where surveillance continued. The empire did not forget its outcasts. Few ever returned, and those who did carried the scars of permanent stigma. Fear, as imperial weapon. Justinian's punishments were never only about morality, they were political. By turning intimacy into heresy, he transformed the private into the public and the personal into the political. The law became an extension of imperial authority. To disobey was not just a crime, it was rebellion against God's chosen ruler. Execution, exile, and penance all served to demonstrate that the emperor's will extended even into the most hidden chambers of life. Sword and flame were symbols, not of justice, but of domination. When the state criminalizes identity, violence becomes righteousness. When the church blesses punishment, silence becomes law. Under Justinian, death was only one form of control. Sometimes erasure was enough. In the Byzantine Empire, reputation did not fade quietly. It was dismantled publicly, stripped away until nothing remained. Love was outlawed, identity criminalized, and memory erased. This was the barbaric legacy of Justinian's laws, not merely to punish, but to ensure that those condemned would vanish from history itself.